A county fair was in full swing that September evening. Kids ran around with cotton candy, couples walked hand in hand, and the smell of fried food filled the air. That's where Ben first saw her. He was standing near the ring toss game, all 6 feet 8 inches of him towering over everyone else. People always noticed Ben first because of his height, but it was his gentle smile that made them stay and talk. He worked on ranches around 3 different counties, moving cattle and fixing fences. His hands were rough from years of hard work, but his heart was soft. The woman at the ring toss booth was trying to win a stuffed animal for her little boy. She kept missing, and the kid was getting upset. Ben watched her count the few dollar bills in her wallet, then hand over another $1 for 3 more rings. She missed again. "Mind if I give it a try?" Ben asked, walking over. His voice was deep but kind. The woman looked up at him. She had tired eyes but a pretty smile. "I promised my son I'd win him that bear," she said. "But I'm not very good at this." Ben handed the man running the game a $5 bill. "Give us 15 rings," he said. Then he knelt down to the little boy's level. "What's your name, buddy?" "Tyler," the boy said shyly. "Well, Tyler, let's get you that bear." Ben tossed the first ring. It landed perfectly around a bottle. The second one did too. By the 5th ring, Tyler was cheering, and by the 10th, a small crowd had gathered to watch the tall cowboy who couldn't seem to miss. "Pick any prize you want," the game operator said. Tyler pointed to the biggest teddy bear hanging from the top of the booth. Ben reached up and grabbed it easily, handing it to the excited boy. "Thank you, mister." Tyler hugged the bear tight. "I'm Lucy," the woman said, extending her hand. "And this is Tyler. I can't thank you enough." "Ben," he replied, shaking her hand gently, "and it was my pleasure." They walked together toward the food trucks. Lucy bought Tyler a corn dog while Ben got them all lemonades. As they sat at a picnic table, Ben learned that Lucy was a single mom. She worked 2 jobs, one at the diner in town during the day and cleaning offices at night. Tyler was 7, and they lived in a small trailer park just outside town. "It's not much," Lucy said, stirring her lemonade with a straw. "But it's what I can afford right now." Ben could see the worry in her eyes. He'd grown up poor too, moving from one ranch job to another with his dad after his mom died. He knew what it felt like to never have a real home. 3 weeks later, Ben asked Lucy out properly. He picked her up after her diner shift and took her to the only nice restaurant in town. Tyler stayed with Lucy's neighbor, an elderly woman who helped watch him sometimes. Over dinner, Lucy told Ben about her ex-husband who left when Tyler was 5. He'd emptied their savings account and disappeared, leaving her with nothing but debt and a broken heart. She'd been working hard ever since, trying to give Tyler a good life. "I don't date much," she admitted. "Between work and Tyler, there's no time. And honestly, most men don't want to deal with a ready-made family." "Their loss," Ben said simply. By their 3rd date, Ben was spending more time at Lucy's trailer. It was tiny, just 2 small bedrooms, a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people, and a living room where Tyler played with his toys. But Lucy had made it cozy with colorful curtains and family photos. That evening it started raining hard. The sound on the thin metal roof was so loud they could barely hear the TV. Ben noticed how Lucy kept looking up nervously at the ceiling. "Does it always leak?" he asked, seeing her place a pot under a drip in the corner. "Only when it rains, really." "Hard," she said, trying to sound like it was no big deal, but Ben could see it was a big deal. Water was dripping in 3 different places now. The carpet was stained from previous leaks, and Tyler's room had a bucket permanently stationed near his bed. As Ben helped Lucy place more containers around the trailer to catch the water, something stirred deep in his chest. This woman worked so hard, loved her son so much, and deserved so much better than this leaky trailer that probably wasn't even safe. After Tyler went to bed, Ben and Lucy sat on her small couch, listening to the rain and the constant drip, drip, drip into various pots and bowls. "You know what I keep thinking about?" Ben said, taking her hand in his large one. "What's that?" "You and Tyler deserve a real home. Not this trailer that leaks every time it rains. A real house with a yard where Tyler can play, and a kitchen big enough for you to cook in, and a roof that actually keeps the rain out. Lucy laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. That's a nice dream, Ben, but dreams don't pay the bills. Ben turned to face her fully. His eyes were serious now, and when he spoke, his voice was firm with determination. What if I told you it doesn't have to be just a dream? What do you mean? Ben was quiet for a moment, listening to the rain and thinking about his savings account. About all the hours he'd worked on ranches learning to build fences and fix barns. About this woman and her little boy who deserve so much more. I mean, I want to build you a house, Lucy, with my own 2 hands, a real house that you and Tyler can call home forever. Lucy stared at him. Ben, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. He squeezed her hand gently. I know it sounds crazy. I know we haven't been together very long. But I care about you and Tyler more than I've ever cared about anyone. And I promise you this, I'm going to build you a home. The rain kept falling on the trailer roof, but inside, something had changed. Ben had made a promise that would transform all their lives. He just didn't know yet how hard it would be to keep it. Winter came early that year, and with it, Ben became a regular part of Lucy and Tyler's daily life. Every morning before heading to the ranch, he'd stop by the trailer to check on them. Every evening after work, he'd come back with his toolbox. And a smile. The first thing Ben fixed was the leaky roof. He climbed up there on a freezing Saturday morning, his breath visible in the cold air, and patched every hole he could find. Lucy watched from below, holding the ladder steady and worrying he might fall. Be careful up there, she called out. Always. Am, Ben replied, but Lucy noticed how he moved carefully across the icy metal, taking his time to do the job right. When the next rainstorm came, not a single drop made it inside. Tyler ran around the trailer checking all the old leak spots, amazed that they were completely dry. Ben fixed our house, Tyler announced proudly to his neighbor friend, but Ben wasn't done. The trailer's heater barely worked, leaving Lucy and Tyler bundling up in sweaters even inside. Ben showed up one evening with a new space heater and spent 2 hours making sure it was installed safely. You don't have to do all this, Lucy told him as he tested the heater for the 3rd time. Yes, I do, Ben said simply. You and Tyler shouldn't be cold in your own home. As the weeks passed, Ben became like a father to Tyler. He helped with homework at the tiny kitchen table, his large frame folded awkwardly into the small chair. He taught Tyler how to throw a football in the narrow space between trailers. When Tyler had a nightmare, Ben was there to check under the bed for monsters. There's nothing there, buddy, Ben would say in his calm, deep voice. And even if there was, they'd take one look at me and run away. Tyler would giggle and go back to sleep, feeling safe with Ben in the house, but it was during those quiet winter evenings that Ben's real work began. After Tyler went to bed, Ben would pull out a notebook and start sketching. Lucy would sit beside him on the couch, watching as he drew lines and erased them, drew them again, and measured spaces with his hands. What are you doing? She asked the first time she saw him drawing. Planning our house, Ben said, not looking up from his sketch. Lucy's heart skipped. Our house? Well, yours and Tyler's house, Ben corrected, his cheeks turning slightly red. But if things keep going well between us, ... Lucy reached over and took his hand. I'd like that. The our house part, I mean. From then on, the house plans became their evening entertainment. Ben would show Lucy his latest ideas, where the kitchen would go, how big Tyler's room would be, where they could put a reading nook by the window. I want Tyler to have his own bathroom, Ben said one night, sketching carefully. Growing boy needs his privacy. And I want a real kitchen, Lucy added. One where I can actually cook a proper meal without bumping into everything? Ben nodded. Seriously, and made notes in the margins. Every suggestion Lucy made went into the plans. During his lunch breaks at the ranch, Ben would read construction books he'd borrowed from the library. His coworkers thought he'd lost his mind. You've never built a house before, said his friend Danny, watching Ben study a book about foundation pouring. Why don't you just save up and hire someone? Because I promised I'd build it myself, Ben replied. Besides, how hard can it be? I've been fixing ranch buildings for years, Danny laughed. Ranch buildings and houses are two different things, my friend. But Ben was determined to learn. He watched YouTube videos on his phone during breaks, taking notes on everything from electrical wiring to plumbing. The ranch foreman, Pete, noticed Ben's new obsession. You really serious about this house building thing? Pete asked one day. Dead serious, Ben replied. Pete nodded slowly. My brother-in-law is a contractor. I could ask him to give you some pointers. That would be amazing. And so Ben's education expanded. Pete's brother-in-law, Tom, met with Ben on weekends and taught him the basics of reading blueprints and understanding building codes. Tom was impressed by Ben's eagerness to learn. Most guys your age think they know everything already, Tom said. But you actually listen. Meanwhile, Ben was saving every penny he could. He took extra shifts at the ranch, worked weekends, and even picked up odd jobs around town. His savings account, which had been practically empty when he met Lucy, began to grow. Lucy noticed how tired Ben was getting. He'd work all day, come to the trailer to spend time with her and Tyler, then stay up late studying construction techniques. Dark circles appeared under his eyes. You're pushing yourself too hard, she told him one evening as he dozed off over his sketches. I'm fine, Ben mumbled, but Lucy could see he wasn't. Ben, look at me. He raised his head, blinking sleepily. I appreciate everything you're doing, but I don't want you making yourself sick over this house. It doesn't have to happen right away. Ben sat up straighter, suddenly more awake. Yes, it does. You shouldn't have to live in this trailer any longer than necessary. And spring is coming. That's the best time to start building. Lucy could see there was no changing his mind. Ben had made up his mind to build them a house, and nothing was going to stop him. As winter slowly gave way to spring, Ben's plans became more detailed and his knowledge more complete. He'd learned about permits and inspections, about the different types of foundations and how to frame walls properly. Most importantly, his relationship with Lucy and Tyler had grown stronger. They felt like a real family now, even in the tiny trailer. Tyler called Ben my Ben when talking to friends. Lucy found herself imagining a future she'd never dared to dream of before, one March evening, as they sat outside the trailer. Watching Tyler play, Ben pulled out his final sketches. I think they're ready, he said, spreading the papers on the picnic table. Lucy looked at the detailed plans. There was Tyler's room with its own bathroom, a big kitchen with windows overlooking the backyard, a living room with a fireplace, and a master bedroom for her and Ben. It's perfect, she whispered. Now I just need to find the right piece of land, Ben said. And then we can start building our home. Lucy leaned against his strong shoulder, feeling hopeful for the first time in years. Ben had already fixed so many things in their lives. Maybe, just maybe, he really could build them the home he'd promised. The first warm day of April brought new hope and a phone call that would change everything. Ben was fixing a fence on the Morrison Ranch when his phone buzzed. It was the real estate agent he'd been working with for months. Ben, I think I've found your land, she said. 5 acres, about 10 minutes outside town. The owner needs to sell quickly, so the price is good. Ben's hands stopped working on the fence post. How good? Within your budget? But you need to see it today if you're interested. I have 3 other people coming to look at it this week. Ben looked at his watch. It was only noon, and he had permission to leave early for house business, thanks to his understanding boss. Pete, I'll be there in 20 minutes. The land was perfect. 5 rolling acres with a few old oak trees and a view of the mountains in the distance. Ben walked the property line, his long legs eating up the ground as he imagined where the house would sit, where Tyler could play, where Lucy could plant a garden. The best part was a small hill that would be perfect for the house. It would give them views of the countryside and keep them above any flooding during heavy rains. I'll take it, Ben told the agent. Don't you want to bring Lucy to see it first? Ben smiled. I want it to be a surprise. That evening, Ben could but barely contain his excitement. After dinner, he suggested they all go for a drive. Where are we going? Tyler asked from the back seat. Just for a ride, Ben said, trying to keep his voice casual. Lucy studied his face. She knew that look. Ben was up to something. When they turned down the dirt road leading to the property, Ben's heart was racing. He parked at the edge of the land and got out. "Come on," he said. "I want to show you something." They walked up the small hill, Tyler running ahead and Lucy walking beside Ben. When they reached the top, Ben stopped. "This is it," he said. Lucy looked around at the open land, the trees, the view. "This is what?" "Our land. I bought it today." Lucy's mouth fell open. Tyler stopped running and stared at Ben. "You bought land?" Lucy asked. 5 acres. Enough space for a house, a big yard for Tyler, maybe even room for a garden if you want one. Lucy spun in a slow circle, taking it all in. "Ben, this is beautiful. But can we afford this? I've been saving every penny for 8 months. I have enough for the land and most of the building materials. I figured out how to do it." Tyler ran back to them, his eyes wide. "Are we really going to live here?" "We're going to build a house right here," Ben said, pointing to a flat spot near the top of the hill. "You'll be able to see for miles from your bedroom window." That night, after Tyler went to bed, Lucy and Ben sat outside the trailer talking about the future. Lucy was excited but nervous. What if something goes wrong? What if you can't finish it? What if we run out of money? Ben took her hands in his. "Do you trust me?" "Of course I do." "Then trust me when I say I will build you a house. I don't care how long it takes or how hard it gets. I promised you a home, and that's what you're going to get." 2 weeks later, Ben got his building permit. The county inspector who approved it looked surprised when he saw that Ben was planning to do all the work himself. "You ever built a house before?" the inspector asked. "No, sir, but I've been learning." "Well, good luck. I'll be checking on your progress, making sure everything meets code." Ben nodded. He'd studied the building codes until he could recite them in his sleep. The first day of construction was a Saturday in early May. Ben had taken the day off from the ranch and borrowed Pete's truck to haul his tools. Lucy and Tyler came to watch as Ben drove wooden stakes into the ground, marking where the foundation would go. "This is where the front door will be," Ben explained to Tyler, standing between 2 stakes. "And this is where your room will be." Tyler ran from stake to stake, imagining rooms and hallways. Lucy stood back, watching Ben work with a mixture of pride and worry. The land looked so big, and Ben looked so small standing in the middle of it with just a hammer and some stakes. "Are you sure you can do this?" she asked when Tyler was out of earshot. Ben straightened up, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Lucy, I've spent my whole life working with my hands. I've built barns and fixed bridges and constructed miles of fencing. Our house is just another building project." But even as he said it, Ben felt a flutter of nervousness in his stomach. Building a house was different from anything he'd ever done. This wasn't just any building. This was going to be Lucy and Tyler's home. It had to be perfect. The next weekend, Ben began digging the foundation. He'd rented a small excavator for the day, figuring it would be faster than digging by hand. But when the machine broke down after only 2 hours, Ben was back to shovels and determination. Tom, Pete's contractor brother-in-law, stopped by to check on Ben's progress. "You know, Ben, I could get a crew out here to dig this foundation in." "One day," Tom offered. "Thanks, but I need to do this myself," Ben replied. Not stopping his digging. Tom watched Ben work for a few minutes. "Mind if I ask why?" "It would save you a lot of time and effort." Ben paused, leaning on his shovel. "I made a promise to Lucy that I would build this house with my own hands. Every board, every nail, every piece of it. If I start hiring people to do parts of it, then I'm not keeping my word?" Tom nodded slowly. "I respect that. But promise me you'll call if you need help with the technical stuff. Electrical and plumbing can be dangerous if done wrong." "I promise." By evening, Ben had dug about a quarter of the foundation. His back ached, his hands were blistered, and he was covered in dirt from head to toe. But when Lucy and Tyler arrived with dinner, Ben was grinning. "Look at this," he said proudly, gesturing to the rectangular hole in the ground. "By next weekend, I'll have the whole foundation dug." Tyler peered into the hole. "It's really deep." "Has to be, buddy. The foundation is the most important part of the whole house. Everything else sits on top of it, so it has to be strong." As they ate sandwiches sitting on the tailgate of Ben's truck, Lucy watched her boyfriend with growing amazement. 3 months ago, this land had been empty. Now there was a real hole in the ground where their house would stand. "I can't believe this is really happening," she said. Ben reached over and squeezed her hand. "Believe it. By this time next year, you and Tyler will be sleeping in your new home." As the sun set over their 5 acres, painting the sky orange and pink, Ben felt a deep satisfaction he'd never experienced before. This was just the beginning, but already he could see their future taking shape. Every shovelful of dirt, every stake in the ground, every hour of planning was bringing them closer to the home he'd promised. It was going to be hard work. There would be problems and setbacks and moments when he'd wonder if he'd bitten off more than he could chew. But looking at Lucy's face, seeing Tyler's excitement, Ben knew he'd made the right choice. He was going to build them a home, one day at a time, with his own 2 hands. And nothing was going to stop him. Ben's real education began the day he tried to pour concrete. He'd watched dozens of YouTube videos and read 3 different books about laying foundations. He'd measured everything twice and bought what he thought was enough concrete mix. But when he started mixing the concrete by hand in a wheelbarrow, he quickly realized he was in trouble. "This is going to take forever," he muttered to himself, sweat already dripping down his face after just one small batch. His phone rang. It was Lucy calling from her lunch break at the diner. "How's it going?" she asked. Ben looked at the tiny amount of concrete in his wheelbarrow, then at the large foundation hole that needed to be filled. "Great," he lied. "Just fine." After hanging up, Ben stared at the problem for a long moment. Then he did what he'd been doing for months. He called Tom. "I need help," Ben admitted when Tom answered. "What's wrong?" "I'm trying to pour concrete by hand, and at this rate, it'll take me 6 months just to finish the foundation." Tom laughed. "Ben, nobody pours a foundation by hand." "You need a concrete mixer. Why didn't you rent one?" I didn't know." "Meet me at the equipment rental place in an hour. I'll help you figure out what you need." That afternoon, Ben learned his first important lesson about construction. The right tools make all the difference. With a proper concrete mixer, he was able to complete the foundation in 1 weekend, instead of 6 months. But the foundation was just the beginning of Ben's education. When it came time to frame the walls, Ben discovered that building a house required math skills he'd never needed on the ranch. Measuring angles, calculating lumber lengths, making sure everything was perfectly square. It was like solving puzzles all day long. His first attempt at framing the front wall was a disaster. After working all day Saturday, Ben stepped back to admire his work and realized the wall was crooked. Not just a little crooked, it looked like it might fall over in a strong wind. "This isn't right," he said to himself the next morning. He tore it all down and started over. This time he measured everything 3 times before making any cuts. He used a level constantly, checking and rechecking to make sure every board was straight. By evening, he had one wall that actually looked like it belonged on a house. "One down, about 30 to go," Ben said with a tired smile. The hardware store became Ben's second home. At least 3 times a week, he'd show up with questions for whoever was working. "I need screws for exterior walls," he'd say. "What kind of siding are you using?" they'd ask. Double quotes. Wood? What type of wood? What thickness? Are you going over house wrap or directly onto the sheathing? Ben would pull out his notebook and write down terms he'd never heard before, then spend his evening break looking them up online. Mike, who managed the hardware store, started setting aside construction guides for Ben. "Here's a book about electrical wiring," Mike would say when Ben came in. "And this one explains different types of insulation." "Thanks, Mike. Add it to my tab." Ben's truck became a mobile library. The passenger seat was always full of construction books, his phone had dozens of how-to videos downloaded, and his notebook was filled with diagrams and measurements. During lunch breaks at the ranch, Ben would watch videos about plumbing while eating a sandwich. His coworkers thought he'd gone crazy. "You know, there are people who do this for a living, right?" His friend Danny said one day. People who went to school to learn how to build houses? I know, Ben replied, not looking up from a video about installing electrical outlets. But I promised Lucy I'd build it myself. What if you mess it up? What if the house falls down? Ben paused the video and looked at Danny. Then I'll build it again until I get it right. The learning curve was steep, and Ben made plenty of mistakes. He bought the wrong type of insulation and had to return it. He cut several boards too short and had to buy new lumber. He wired an outlet backwards and had to call an electrician friend to help him fix it safely, but with each mistake, Ben learned something new. And slowly, the house began to take shape. The walls went up straighter and faster as Ben got better at framing. The windows fit properly on the first try instead of the third. The roof trusses went on without any major problems. People started noticing Ben's project. Cars would slow down as they passed the property, and neighbors would stop to watch the tall cowboy working alone on his house. Mrs. Henderson, who lived down the road, started bringing Ben cold lemonade on hot days. "You're making good progress," she'd say, handing him a glass. "Thank you, ma'am. Still have a long way to go?" "My late husband built our house himself back in 1962. Took him 2 years, but it's still standing strong. Sometimes the slow way is the best way." Those words encouraged Ben more than Mrs. Henderson knew. On days when nothing seemed to go right, when he'd cut something wrong or couldn't figure out how to make two pieces fit together, he'd remember that other people had done this before. Regular people who learned as they went, just like he was doing. Lucy and Tyler visited the site every evening. Tyler loved climbing around on the wooden frame, pretending the rooms were already finished. "This is my room," he'd shout from the second floor, standing between the wall studs. "And I can see forever from up here." Lucy was amazed by Ben's progress. What had started as just stakes in the ground now looked like an actual house. She could walk through the rooms and imagine cooking in the kitchen, reading in the living room, tucking Tyler into bed in his own space. "How did you learn to do all this?" she asked Ben one evening as they stood in what would be their bedroom. "YouTube, mostly," Ben admitted with a laugh, "and a lot of trial and error, and help from people like Tom and Mike at the hardware store." "Ah, you sure it's safe? I mean, I trust you completely, but—" Ben understood her concern. "Every step gets inspected by the county. If something's not right, they make me fix it before I can continue. So far, I've passed every inspection." That was true, though Ben didn't mention how nervous he got before each inspection, or how he'd sometimes spend entire nights double-checking his work to make sure everything met code. As summer progressed, Ben's skills improved dramatically. He could frame a wall in half the time it took him initially. He understood how electrical circuits worked and could wire outlets and switches properly. He'd learned to read blueprints like a professional and could calculate exactly how much material he needed for each phase of construction. Most importantly, Ben had learned to be patient with himself. When something didn't work the first time, he didn't get frustrated anymore. He'd step back, figure out what went wrong, and try again. "Building a house is like learning a new language," he told Lucy one evening. "At first, nothing makes sense. But after a while, you start to understand how all the pieces fit together." As autumn approached, Ben looked at his progress with pride. The house had walls, a roof, windows, and doors. From the outside, it looked like a real home. There was still a lot of work to do on the inside, but Ben had proven to himself and everyone else that he could do this. He'd kept his promise so far. Now he just had to finish what he'd started. Word traveled fast in their small town. By late summer, everyone knew about the tall cowboy who was building a house for his girlfriend and her son. What started as curious looks from passing cars turned into something Ben never expected. Help. It began with Pete, Ben's boss at the ranch. One Saturday morning, Pete showed up at the construction site with his truck full of tools. "What are you doing here?" Ben asked, surprised to see his boss on the weekend. "Thought you might need an extra pair of hands putting up those roof trusses," Pete said, climbing out of his truck. "That's not really a one-man job." Ben had been dreading the roof trusses. Each one weighed over 100 pounds, and getting them positioned correctly while working alone seemed nearly impossible. "I can't ask you to work on your day off," Ben protested. You didn't ask, I offered. Now let's get these things up before it gets too hot. With Pete's help, the roof trusses went up in 4 hours instead of the 2 days Ben had planned. As they worked, Pete shared stories about building his own barn years earlier. Made every mistake in the book, Pete laughed as they positioned another truss. But that's how you learn. And having help makes it go a lot faster. The next weekend, Pete brought his neighbor Carlos, who ran a small electrical business in town. Ben, meet Carlos, Pete said. He's going to make sure you don't burn the house down with your wiring. Carlos looked at Ben's electrical work so far and nodded approvingly. You're doing good work. But let me show you a few tricks that'll make it easier. For the next several hours, Carlos taught Ben professional techniques for running wire and connecting outlets. He showed Ben how to wire the main electrical panel and explained which circuits needed special protection. You're a natural at this, Carlos told Ben. Most people are scared of electrical work, but you understand it. I just don't want to mess it up, Ben replied. Lucy and Tyler need to be safe in this house. They will be. You're being careful. And doing everything right? Word of the house project spread through the coffee shop where Lucy worked, the feed store where Ben bought supplies, and the school where Tyler was starting 3rd grade. People were impressed that Ben was building an entire house by himself, and many wanted to help. Bill Henderson, a retired carpenter who lived down the road, stopped by one evening while Ben was working on siding. Mind if I take a look? Bill asked. Sure, Ben replied. Setting down his hammer. Bill walked around the house, examining Ben's work carefully. This is solid construction, he said finally. You're doing a professional job. Thank you, sir. I'm trying my best. I can see that, I've got 40 years of carpentry experience just sitting around doing nothing since I retired. If you'd like, I could come by on weekends and share some of what I know. Ben couldn't believe his luck. That would be amazing, but I can't pay you anything. Bill waved his hand dismissively. I don't want money. I want to see this house get finished right. Besides, it keeps my hands busy and my wife stops complaining about me being underfoot all the time. Having Bill's expertise made an enormous difference. Ben learned how to cut siding perfectly, how to make trim work look professional, and how to solve problems he hadn't even known existed yet. The secret to good carpentry, Bill explained as they worked on the front porch, is taking your time and measuring twice. Rushing always causes more problems than it solves. Soon, other people began showing up on weekends. Danny from the ranch brought his teenage son to help with painting. Mrs. Henderson started bringing lunch for whoever was working. Tom, Pete's contractor brother-in-law, came by regularly to inspect Ben's progress and offer advice. Lucy was amazed by the community support. She started organizing Saturday barbecues for all the volunteers, setting up tables in the shade of the old oak trees and cooking hamburgers and hot dogs for anyone who came to help. I can't believe all these people are giving up their weekends to help us, she told Ben one evening as they cleaned up after another productive day. I know, I keep trying to figure out how to pay them back. You are paying them back, Lucy said. You're working harder than anyone. They can see how much this means to you, and they want to be part of it. Tyler was in heaven with all the activity. He appointed himself the official tool runner and water boy, racing around the job site with important missions like bringing hammers and delivering cold drinks to the workers. Tyler, I need a Phillips head screwdriver, someone would call out. Tyler would run to the tool area, carefully select the right screwdriver, and deliver it with the seriousness of a surgeon's assistant. Good job, buddy, the workers would say, and Tyler would beam with pride. The volunteers brought more than just labor. They brought expertise from different trades. Miguel, who worked at the lumber yard, taught Ben how to order materials efficiently and save money. Janet, who owned a small plumbing business, showed Lucy how to plan the bathroom layout for maximum efficiency. You want the toilet here, not there, Janet explained, walking through the framed bathroom with Lucy. This way, the plumbing is simpler and you have more space. Even people who couldn't help with construction found ways to contribute. The local diner owner, Fred, started giving Lucy extra food to take home for Ben. knowing he was working too hard to cook proper meals for himself. "A man building a house needs to eat," Fred said, packing up containers of beef stew and cornbread. "Tell that boyfriend of yours this is on the house." As autumn arrived, the weekend work parties had become a neighborhood tradition. Cars would start arriving Saturday morning, and by noon, there might be 8 or 10 people working on different parts of the house. Ben was learning that building a house wasn't just about construction skills, it was about managing people and coordinating different jobs. He found himself naturally taking charge, directing traffic, and making sure everyone had meaningful work to do. "Ben's turning into a real foreman," Pete observed one day, watching Ben organize the volunteers into efficient teams. "He's got leadership skills," Bill agreed. "Always did, just never had a chance to use them before." The most touching moment came when Tyler's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, brought her whole family to help one Saturday. "Tyler talks about this house every day in class," she explained to Ben. "He's so proud of what you're doing for his family. My husband is handy with tools and we wanted to contribute." Ben had to step away for a moment, overwhelmed by the kindness of people who barely knew him but believed in what he was doing. "Why are you all helping me?" he asked Bill one day as they worked on installing windows. Bill paused, considering the question. "I guess because we can see you're doing something special here. You made a promise to a woman and her little boy, and you're keeping it no matter how hard it gets. That means something to people, but you're all sacrificing your weekends." "Ben, look around you," Bill said, gesturing to the house taking shape around them. "How often do we get to be part of building someone's dream? This house isn't just your project anymore. It's become the whole community's project. We're all invested in seeing you succeed." As Ben looked at all the people working on his house, he realized Bill was right. What had started as his personal promise to Lucy had become something bigger. The whole community was helping him keep his word, and in return, they got to be part of something meaningful and positive. The house was no longer just being built by Ben's hands. It was being built by the hands of an entire community that believed in love, hard work, and keeping promises. The first real test came in late August when the skies opened up and didn't stop raining for 6 straight days. Ben had just finished the basement walls and was proud of his work. The space was going to be perfect for storage and maybe a workshop someday. He'd followed all the instructions for waterproofing, applied the proper sealants, and made sure the drainage was correct, but Mother Nature had different plans. On the 3rd day of heavy rain, Ben got a call from Mrs. Henderson. "Ben, dear, I think you need to get out to your house," she said. "There's water running down the hill like a river." Ben's heart sank. He grabbed his rain gear and drove through the storm to the construction site. What he found made his stomach drop. Water was pouring into his basement. Not just a little water, it looked like someone had turned on a fire hose. Everything he'd worked so hard to build was underwater. Ben stood in the rain, staring at his flooded basement, feeling more defeated than he'd ever felt in his life. Months of work were ruined. All his careful waterproofing had failed completely. His phone rang. It was Lucy. "How's the house holding up in this storm?" she asked. Ben looked at the disaster in front of him and almost told her the truth. But he couldn't bear to disappoint her. "Not yet. It's fine," he lied. "Just checking to make sure everything's secure." After hanging up, Ben sat in his truck and let himself feel sorry for himself for exactly 5 minutes. Then he called Tom. "My basement is completely flooded," Ben said when Tom answered. "How bad?" "Bad, really bad." "Like start over from scratch bad?" Tom was quiet for a moment. "I'll be there in an hour. Don't do anything until I get there." When Tom arrived, he waded into the flooded basement with Ben. They spent 2 hours figuring out where the water was coming from and why Ben's waterproofing had failed. "It's not your fault," Tom finally said. "This much rain would have overwhelmed most basement systems, but the good news is we can fix this." "How?" "We're going to have to pump out all this water, let everything dry completely, then redo the waterproofing. But this time, we'll add a proper drainage system around the foundation." Ben's savings account took a major hit. The pump rental, the New waterproofing materials and the drainage system ate up money he'd been saving for the interior work. But he didn't have a choice. For the next 3 weekends, Ben and his volunteers worked to repair the flood damage. It was discouraging work, tearing out everything they'd built and starting over. "I feel like I'm going backwards," Ben confided to Bill one day as they installed drainage pipes. "Sometimes you have to go backwards to go forwards," Bill replied. "The important thing is that you're not giving up." Just when Ben thought things were getting back on track, the county inspector showed up for a surprise visit. Inspector Johnson was new to the job and had a reputation for being extremely thorough. He spent 3 hours going over every inch of Ben's work with a fine-tooth comb. "We have some problems," Johnson said finally, pulling out his notebook. Ben's heart started racing. "What kind of problems?" "Your electrical work in the kitchen doesn't meet current code. The outlets are too close to the sink, and you don't have GFCI protection where you need it." "But Carlos helped me with all the electrical. He said it was..." "Correct. Carlos did good work, but the codes changed last year. You'll need to rewire the entire kitchen before I can approve this phase." Ben stared at the inspector. "The entire kitchen?" "I'm afraid so. Also, your plumbing rough-in has some issues." "Nothing major, but you'll need to make corrections before the final inspection." After the inspector left, Ben sat on what would eventually be his front porch and did some calculations in his head. Rewiring the kitchen would cost at least $1,000 in materials. The plumbing corrections would be another few hundred. His savings account was already strained from the basement disaster. That evening, Ben had to tell Lucy about the setbacks. He'd been dreading this conversation for weeks. "How bad is it?" Lucy asked when Ben explained about the inspection failures. "Bad. I need to redo a lot of electrical work, and it's going to cost money I don't have." Lucy was quiet for a long moment. "What if we took out a small loan? Just enough to cover the materials?" "No," Ben said firmly. "I promised I'd build this house with my own money in my own hands. Taking out a loan feels like cheating." "Ben, being practical isn't cheating, it's smart." But Ben had made up his mind. If he was going to keep his promise, he'd find another way. The next week, Ben picked up every extra shift he could at the ranch. He worked from dawn until dark, then drove straight to the house to work by floodlight until he couldn't see straight. Lucy was worried about him. He'd lost weight and had dark circles under his eyes. He barely had energy to play with Tyler anymore. "You're working yourself to death," she told him one evening when he fell asleep at the dinner table. "I'm fine," Ben mumbled, but he clearly wasn't. "No, you're not." "When's the last time you took a day off?" Ben had to think about it. "I don't remember." "That's not healthy, Ben. The house isn't worth destroying yourself over." But Ben couldn't slow down. Every day he didn't work on the house was another day Lucy and Tyler had to stay in that leaky trailer. Every delay meant winter was getting closer, and Ben wanted them in their new home before the cold weather arrived. The breaking point came on a particularly hot September day. Ben had been working alone, trying to rewire the kitchen outlets. The temperature was over 90 degrees, and the unfinished house was like an oven inside. Ben was lying on his back under the kitchen counter, struggling to connect wires in the cramped space when everything started going black. The last thing he remembered was hearing his tools clatter to the floor. He woke up 20 minutes later to find Mrs. Henderson kneeling beside him, fanning him with a piece of cardboard. "You passed out, dear," she said gently. "I saw your truck here but hadn't seen you moving around, so I came to check." Ben tried to sit up, but his head was spinning. "You need to get out of this heat and drink some water," Mrs. Henderson insisted. "And probably see a doctor." "I'm fine," Ben protested. But even he could hear how weak his voice sounded. Mrs. Henderson helped him to his truck and drove him home. When Lucy saw Ben's condition, she was furious. "This has to stop," she said after Mrs. Henderson explained what had happened. "You could have seriously hurt yourself." "I need to finish the house." "Not if it kills you." "Ben, look at yourself. You're exhausted, you're not eating right, and now you're passing out from heat exhaustion. This isn't what I wanted when you promised to build us a home." That night, Lucy made Ben promise to take the next day off. No work, no trips to the hardware store, no checking on the house. Just rest. It was the first day off Ben had taken in 3 months. As he slept for 12 straight hours, Lucy realized how close she'd come to losing the man she loved to his own determination. When Ben woke up, Lucy was sitting beside the bed with a serious expression. "We need to talk," she said. "About what?" "About finding a balance. I love that you're keeping your promise to build us a house. But I need you to be alive and healthy when it's finished. If that means it takes an extra few months, then that's what it takes." Ben started to protest, but Lucy held up her hand. "I mean it, Ben. I'd rather live in this trailer for another year than lose you to exhaustion or a preventable accident." Looking at Lucy's worried face, Ben finally understood. His promise to build her a home wasn't just about the house, it was about building a life together. And that life wouldn't mean much if he destroyed himself in the process. "Okay," he said finally, "I'll slow down. But I'm not giving up. I don't want you to give up. I just want you to be smart about it." From that day forward, Ben forced himself to take at least one day off each week. He started eating regular meals again and stopped working past dark. The house progress slowed down, but Ben's health improved dramatically. The setbacks had been costly and discouraging, but they'd also taught Ben an important lesson. Building a home wasn't just about construction skills and determination. It was about perseverance, patience, and knowing when to ask for help. Most importantly, it was about remembering why he was building the house in the first place, to create a better life for the people he loved. October arrived with crisp mornings and the smell of wood smoke in the air. Ben could feel winter approaching, and he knew he was running out of time. The outside of the house was nearly complete, but the interior still needed months of work. Lucy's birthday was coming up in 2 weeks, and Ben had secretly set a goal that felt almost impossible. He wanted to surprise her by having the house ready for them to move in. "That's crazy," Tom told him when Ben shared his plan. "You still need to finish the electrical, do all the plumbing, install flooring, paint every room, and put in a kitchen. That's at least 2 months of work." "I know," Ben said, looking at his lengthy to-do list, "but I have an idea." Ben's idea was to work around the clock for the next 2 weeks. He'd taken vacation time from the ranch, using up every day he'd earned in the past year. His plan was to work 18-hour days, sleeping only when exhaustion forced him to stop. Lucy didn't know about Ben's secret timeline. She thought he was just taking some time off to catch up on housework before winter made outdoor construction. Impossible. The first few days went well. Ben installed kitchen cabinets he'd been building in Pete's workshop during lunch breaks for the past 2 months. Each cabinet was made from pine lumber he'd gotten at a discount from Miguel at the lumberyard. They weren't fancy, but they were solid and built to last. "These look professional," Bill commented when he stopped by to check on Ben's progress. "You've really learned a lot this year." "Thanks to you and everyone else who helped teach me," Ben replied. Adjusting the doors on the upper cabinets, Ben had learned to make the most of every minute. While paint dried in one room, he'd work on plumbing in another. When he was waiting for the electrical inspector, he'd install baseboards or work on trim. Carlos came by in the evenings to help with the final electrical connections. "You're really going to finish this by her birthday?" he asked as they wired the last bedroom outlet. "I have to," Ben said. "Lucy's been living in that trailer for over a year now. She deserves to wake up in her own home on her birthday." The hardwood floors were Ben's biggest challenge. He'd saved money by buying unfinished lumber and planned to install and finish the floors himself. But laying hardwood is precise work that requires patience and skill. Ben started in Tyler's room, figuring if he made mistakes, at least they'd be hidden under a kid's furniture and toys. The first few boards went down crooked, and Ben had to pull them up and start over. "Measure twice, cut once," he muttered, repeating Bill's favorite saying. By the third day, Ben was getting the hang of it. The boards started going down straight and tight. Miguel stopped by after work to help, bringing his teenage son David. "My dad built floors for 20 years before he started working at the lumberyard," David explained as they worked. "He taught me some tricks that might help." With Miguel and David's help, the flooring went much faster. They worked until nearly midnight each night, the sound of their hammers echoing through the house. Lucy started getting suspicious when Ben came home completely exhausted every night, covered in sawdust and barely able to stay awake through dinner. "What exactly are you doing out there all day?" she asked one evening as Ben nearly fell asleep in his soup. "Just finishing up some things," Ben said vaguely. "Want to make sure we can move in before winter." "Ben, we've talked about this. You don't have to kill yourself to finish quickly." "I know. I'm being careful." But Ben wasn't being careful about his own health. He was surviving on coffee, determination, and about 4 hours of sleep per night. His hands were cut and bruised from working too fast. His back ached constantly from installing flooring on. His hands and knees dot with 1 week left until Lucy's birthday. Ben realized he was behind schedule. The floors were done, the electrical was mostly complete, and the plumbing was working. But he still needed to paint every room, install all the trim work, and somehow find and install appliances for the kitchen. That's when the community stepped in again. Word had gotten out about Ben's secret plan, and people started showing up to help without being asked. Mrs. Henderson arrived one morning with painting supplies and 2 of her neighbors. "We're here to paint," she announced. "You just tell us what colors go where." Pete brought a crew from the ranch to help with trim work. Carlos returned with his whole family to finish the electrical. Even Tyler got involved, carefully painting baseboards with a small brush while the adults worked on walls and ceilings. The house became a beehive of activity. In one room, people were painting walls while others installed light fixtures. The kitchen buzzed with volunteers assembling cabinets and connecting appliances that Bill had somehow acquired through his contractor connections. "Where did you find a refrigerator?" Ben asked, amazed to see appliances being delivered. "My buddy owns an appliance store," Bill explained. "This one's a floor model with a tiny dent in the side. He sold it to me for what he paid wholesale." "I can't afford a refrigerator right now." "Consider it an early housewarming gift from all of us." Ben was overwhelmed by the generosity. People were donating not just their time, but materials, expertise, and even appliances to help him meet his deadline. Lucy knew something was happening when she saw cars parked along the road near their property every evening. But every time she asked Ben about it, he'd change the subject. "Are you planning some kind of surprise?" she asked suspiciously. "Maybe," Ben admitted with a tired smile. 3 days before Lucy's birthday, disaster struck again. The county inspector arrived for the final inspection and found problems with 2 bathroom fixtures that needed to be corrected before he could approve occupancy. "You've got to be kidding me," Ben said when he heard the news. "Sorry," Inspector Johnson said. "I know you're trying to finish quickly, but these safety issues have to be fixed first." Ben slumped against the wall, exhausted and defeated. There was no way he could fix the plumbing problems and finish everything else in 3 days. That's when Janet, the plumber who'd helped earlier, stepped forward. "I can fix those problems tonight," she offered, "and I won't charge you. This house deserves to pass inspection." Working by floodlight, Janet and Ben corrected the plumbing issues. By midnight, everything was ready for a re-inspection. The next morning, Inspector Johnson returned and went through the house one more time. Ben held his breath as the inspector checked every outlet, faucet, and light switch. "Everything looks good," Johnson finally announced. "You've got your certificate of occupancy." Ben almost cried with relief. The final 2 days were a blur of last-minute details. Volunteers cleaned every surface, installed the last pieces of trim, and even hung curtains that Lucy's co-workers at the diner had sewn as a surprise. Tyler was the hardest part of keeping the secret. He was so excited about the surprise that he could barely contain himself around his mother. "Are you feeling okay?" Lucy asked him at dinner the night before her birthday. "You're acting strange." "I'm fine," Tyler said, grinning so widely it looked like his face might split in half. Ben was exhausted, but excited as he put the finishing touches on the house. Tomorrow, he would finally keep the promise he'd made on that rainy night in the trailer more than a year ago. The house wasn't perfect. There were small imperfections that only Ben could see. Slightly uneven paint lines, a cabinet door that hung a tiny bit crooked, a floorboard with a small gap. But it was solid, safe, and built with love. Most importantly, it was home. As Ben walked through the completed house that final evening, checking every room one last time, he felt a deep satisfaction he'd never experienced before. Every board, every nail, every wire had been placed by his own hands or by the hands of people who believed in his promise. Tomorrow, Lucy would wake up in her own home for the first time in her life, and Tyler would have a room of his own with windows overlooking their 5 acres. Ben had kept his word. Now he just had to figure out how to surprise them with it. Lucy's birthday morning started like any other day. She woke up in the cramped trailer, made coffee on the tiny stove, and got Tyler ready for school. But Ben had already left for what she thought was another day of work at the ranch. "Happy birthday, Mom," Tyler said, bouncing on her bed with barely contained excitement. "Thank you, sweetie." Lucy hugged her son, wondering why he seemed even more energetic than usual. "Ben said he has a special surprise for you after I get home from school. Did he now?" Lucy smiled. "I wonder what it could be." If only she knew. While Lucy was at work serving breakfast at the diner, Ben was making final preparations at the house. He'd recruited Mrs. Henderson to help with the surprise, and together they were putting the last touches on what would be the most important day of Ben's life. "The flowers look perfect on the kitchen table," Mrs. Henderson said, adjusting the bouquet she'd brought from her garden. "And you're sure all the utilities are working?" Ben asked nervously, checking the lights for the 100th time. "Everything's perfect, dear. The electricity works, the water runs hot and cold, the heat is working beautifully. This house is ready for a family." Ben had barely slept the night before. After 18 months of construction, after all the setbacks and challenges, after all the help from friends and neighbors, this was the moment he'd been working toward. At 3:30, Ben picked Tyler up from school as planned. "Is it time?" Tyler whispered as he got in the truck, as if speaking too loudly might ruin the surprise. "It's time," Ben confirmed. They drove to the diner where Lucy was finishing her shift. Ben's hands were actually shaking as he parked outside. "Why are you nervous?" Tyler asked. "Mom's going to love it." "I know, I want everything to be perfect." Lucy came out of the diner carrying a small bag of leftover birthday cake that Fred had made for her. She was tired after a long day on her feet, but she smiled when she saw Ben and Tyler waiting for her. "So what's this big surprise?" she asked, climbing into the truck. "You'll see," Ben said, trying to keep his voice casual. As they drove, Lucy noticed they were heading toward their property. "Are we going to check on the house?" Something like that. When they pulled up to the property, Lucy was amazed by what she saw. The house looked completely different from the last time she'd visited. The exterior was finished and painted, the porch had railings and steps, and there were even flower boxes under the windows. "Ben, it looks incredible. You've made so much progress." "Come take a look inside," Ben said, his heart pounding. Lucy walked up the front steps, admiring the solid wood porch Ben had built. But when she reached for the door handle, Ben stopped her. "Wait," he said. "Before we go in, I want to say something." Lucy turned to face him, puzzled by the serious expression on his face. "A year and a half ago, I made you a promise. I said I would build you a home with my own 2 hands. I said you and Tyler deserved better than a leaky trailer." Ben ... Let me finish. Ben took her hands in his. "This house represents more than just walls and a roof. It represents my commitment to you and Tyler. It represents the life I want to build with you." Lucy's eyes were starting to fill with tears, though she didn't understand why. "I love you, Lucy. I love Tyler like he was my own son. And I want us to be a real family." Ben dropped to one knee right there on the front porch, pulling a small ring box from his pocket. "Will you marry me, Lucy? Will you let me be your husband and Tyler's dad? Will you make this house a home with me?" Lucy's hands flew to her mouth. "Ben, oh my God, yes, of course." Tyler was jumping up and down with excitement. Mom said yes. Ben slipped the ring onto Lucy's finger with shaking hands, then stood up to kiss his new fiancée. "Now, can we see the house?" Tyler asked impatiently. Ben laughed. Actually, there's more to the surprise. He opened the front door and gestured for Lucy to go first. Welcome home. Lucy stepped through the doorway and stopped dead. The house wasn't just finished on the outside. It was completely finished. Inside, too. Beautiful hardwood floors gleamed under soft lighting. The walls were painted in warm, welcoming colors. Furniture filled the rooms and curtains hung in the windows. Ben, how is this possible? Last week this was just framing and drywall. I had help, a lot of help. Lucy walked through the house in amazement. The kitchen had beautiful cabinets and new appliances. Tyler's room was painted in his favorite color with a window seat overlooking the backyard. The master bedroom had a reading nook and a view of the mountains. This is our house? Lucy whispered. We can really live here. Happy birthday, Ben said softly. We can move in tonight if you want to. Lucy burst into tears, happy tears that had been building up for months of hoping and dreaming. Tyler ran from room to room, shouting with joy about his own bathroom and the big kitchen and the view from his window as the sun set. Neighbors and friends began arriving. Mrs. Henderson brought a casserole for their first dinner in the new house. Pete and his wife came with a bottle of champagne to celebrate the engagement. Carlos arrived with his family, carrying guitars for an impromptu celebration. Soon the house was full of all the people who had helped make Ben's promise come true. Everyone wanted to see the finished house and congratulate the newly engaged couple. Speech! Speech! Someone called out as everyone gathered in the living room. Ben stood up, still hardly believing this day was real. I don't know what to say except thank you. A year and a half ago, I made a promise to Lucy that probably sounded crazy. I had never built a house before. I didn't know anything about construction or electrical work or plumbing. You sure didn't, Carlos called out, making everyone laugh. But I knew I loved Lucy and Tyler, and I knew they deserved a real home. What I didn't know was that I wouldn't be building this house alone. Everyone in this room contributed something, your time, your expertise, your materials, your encouragement. This house wasn't just built by my hands. It was built by all of our hands. Bill raised his glass. To Ben, for keeping his word, and to Lucy and Tyler, for getting the home they deserve. To home? Everyone CHORUSED. Later that evening, after all the guests had gone home, Ben, Lucy, and Tyler sat on their front porch looking out over their 5 acres. Tyler had finally worn himself out and fallen asleep between them on the porch swing. I can't believe this is real, Lucy said, leaning against Ben's shoulder. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up back in the trailer. It's real, Ben assured her. We're home. When you made that promise in the trailer that night, did you really think you could do it? Ben was quiet for a moment, thinking back to that rainy evening that had changed everything. Honestly, I had no idea if I could do it. I just knew I had to try. What made you so determined? Ben looked down at Tyler sleeping peacefully, then at Lucy's face in the porch light. I grew up moving from place to place, never having a real home. I didn't want that for Tyler, and I wanted to prove to you that when I make a promise, I keep it. You did more than keep a promise, Ben. You gave us a foundation for our whole life together. As they sat there in the comfortable silence, Ben reflected on everything that had brought them to this moment. The house around them represented more than just construction skills and determination. It represented the power of love, community, and keeping your word even when it seems impossible. The giant cowboy had indeed built them a home with his own 2 hands. But more than that, he had built them a future. Tyler would grow up in this house with a man who loved him like a father. Lucy would never again have to worry about leaky roofs or unsafe living conditions, and Ben had learned that the best promises aren't the easy ones you're sure you can keep. The best promises are the ones that challenge you to become more than you thought possible. As the stars came out over their 5 acres, the 3 of them went inside their new home. Tyler went to sleep in his own room for the first time, surrounded by walls built with love and determination. Lucy and Ben sat in their kitchen, planning their wedding and their future. The house was perfect, not because it was flawless, but because it was built on a foundation of love, kept promises, and the helping hands of a community that believed In The Power of Keeping Your Word, Ben had sworn to give Lucy a home, and he had done exactly that. But in the process, he had also built something even more valuable, a family that would last a lifetime.